Okay, let's get into one of the most chaotic and just incredible rescue missions in history, the evacuation of Dunkirk in May 1940.
It's a story that really shows how, in the absolute darkest days of World War II, a total disaster was turned into, well, something else entirely.
Yeah, a story of survival. So to really get it, you have to understand the situation. By mid-May 1940, the war on the Western Front had gone completely wrong for the Allies.
It had. Germany had just unleashed this whole new type of warfare. They called it Blitzkrieg.
Which means lightning more.
Right, exactly. Lightning War. And it was so devastating because everyone was still thinking in terms of World War One, slow, grinding trench warfare.
Static lines on a map.
Right. And Blitzkrieg was the total opposite. It was all about speed. Concentrated tank attacks, massive air support, all designed to put straight through enemy lines.
So they weren't fighting for every inch of ground. They were just driving around the Allied army.
They were cutting off their supply routes surrounding them, and the Allied commanders were just completely outmaneuvered.
And that's exactly what happened. The British and French forces, they suddenly found themselves totally cut off.
They were squeezed into this shrinking pocket of land with their backs literally against the sea, all centered around the small French port of Dunkirk.
The situation was just catastrophic. You've got hundreds of thousands of soldiers completely cornered.
And the German army is closing in. The only way out is across the English Channel. If they don't escape, the entire professional British army is gone, captured or destroyed.
So the stakes couldn't be higher. The whole war might depend on this one single evacuation mission.
A mission they called Operation Dynamo. It was truly their last hope.
And this wasn't some big long-term plan, was it?
Not at all. It was a scramble. The British government secretly launched Operation Dynamo on May 26, 1940. The whole thing was run by Vice-Admiral Bertram Ramsay from a command center, built right into the cliffs of Dover.
So he's looking across the channel at this disaster unfolding, and his initial assessment was, well, pretty bleak.
I mean, it was heartbreakingly pessimistic. They figured they only had maybe 2 days before the Germans overran the whole area.
So their goal was tiny.
Unbelievably so. Based on the ships they had, their best-case scenario was to rescue maybe 45,000 men.
45,000, that's it.
That's it. Anything more than that was seen as a bonus.
Which really puts the final number into perspective. Now, the Royal Navy was the backbone of this, of course. Destroyers, big transport ships.
Absolutely. But the channel wasn't some safe highway. It was full of hidden mines, and German submarines, the U-boats, were out there hunting.
So you had danger from below the water. And
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to the danger from above.
And to even make it work, they had to make a really tough call. To fit more soldiers on each ship, they had to leave things behind.
Everything heavy.
Everything. Tanks, trucks, artillery guns, all of it was just abandoned on the beaches. It was a clear choice. Save the men or save the equipment.
They chose the men. But then the Royal Navy hit another problem, one that had nothing to do with the enemy. It was just geography.
Right. The beaches at Dunkirk are very, very shallow. The big destroyers, the ships that could carry hundreds of men, they couldn't get anywhere near the shore.
They would just get stuck in the sand.
Exactly. They'd run aground. So you've got this massive problem. The men are on the beach, and the big ships that can save them are way out in deep water.
So how do you bridge that gap?
Well, this is where the story becomes legendary. The government put out an emergency call to the public.
They basically said, we need any boat that can float.
Any boat. And the response was just incredible. Hundreds of private citizens sailed their own boats across the channel. These became known as the little ships.
And we're not talking about military vessels.
No, not at all. These are fishing boats, pleasure yachts, lifeboats, often sailed by civilians with zero military training, heading straight into a war zone.
They became a kind of ferry service, didn't they?
A vital one. They created this improvised bridge. The little ships could get right up to the beach, load up as many men as they could, and then shuttle them out to the big Navy ships waiting in the channel.
It's an amazing symbol of national unity.
It is, but it was also just practical. It sped the whole process up massively. It showed that, civilian ingenuity could solve a problem that the military couldn't.
But even with the little ships, they needed another way to load men faster. The main harbor was useless, right?
Completely useless. It had been bombed so heavily by the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, so they had to improvise again.
And they used these things called moles.
Yeah, basically long, thin wooden piers that stretched out from the coast into the sea.
And this detail is so important. One of them, the East Mole, was this narrow walkway that went out for nearly a mile. About what, 1.5 kilometers?
And that was the game changer. Because it reached out into deep enough water, the big destroyers could actually tie up alongside it.
So instead of loading a handful of men from a little boat, they could load hundreds at a time directly onto the warships.
And it's a stunning fact that one improvised wooden pier ended up saving more soldiers than all the beach landings combined.
It's just incredible, a testament to battlefield creativity.
Meanwhile, for the soldiers waiting on the sand, it was a complete nightmare.
Just waiting for days. Exposed. They formed these long lines that stretched from the dunes right out into the cold water.
And the conditions were brutal. Almost no food, very little clean water. They were digging little holes in the sand, foxholes, just for some protection from the explosions.
Yet all the accounts mention their discipline. Despite the fear and exhaustion, they waited. They knew panic would just make it worse.
But the biggest threat was constant, and it came from the sky.
The Luftwaffe.
The German Air Force was relentless. They knew exactly where the Allied troops were, and they just pounded the beaches and the ships day and night.
Bombers dropping explosives, fighter planes flying low and firing directly at the men on the beach.
It must have been terrifying. And they sank dozens of ships, both large and small. The whole rescue was happening under a constant air raid.
So how did the evacuations survive? What was protecting them?
Their shield was the Royal Air Force, the RAF. British pilots flew non-stop patrols over the channel, engaging the German planes in these intense aerial battles, dogfights.
They were fighting for control of the air above the beaches.
Exactly. And many of those pilots didn't come back. But their sacrifice kept the Luftwaffe from just completely shutting the whole operation down.
And while that fight was happening in the air, another critical sacrifice was being made on the ground.
This is a part of the story that is so important, but sometimes gets overlooked.
The French holding the line.
Yes, a large force of French soldiers was ordered to stay behind and defend the perimeter around Dunkirk. Their job was simple: buy time.
They knew they weren't getting on the ships.
They knew. They fought heroically, using roadblocks, defending buildings, anything to slow down the German tank columns that were trying to break through to the coast.
And that time was everything.
It was vital. Their holding action delayed the Germans for several crucial days. That was the window that allowed the evacuation to succeed. Without them, tens of thousands more men would have been trapped.
It was an incredible sacrifice. Many were killed or captured when the perimeter finally fell.
But their actions were the foundation of the rescue.
So when the operation finally ended on June 4th, the final number was just staggering.
Yeah, remember that initial pessimistic goal? 45,000 men.
The final tally was over 338,000 soldiers saved. British, French, Belgian.
It was a number that nobody thought was possible. It wasn't a military victory, not even close. It was a retreat. But it prevented a total collapse of the Allied war effort.
Because without those experienced soldiers, Britain would have had almost no one left to defend itself.
Or to eventually fight back. But that brings us to the cost. We said they left the equipment behind. The scale of that loss is hard to comprehend.
We're talking about almost the entire British Army's heavy gear.
Over 60,000 vehicles, tanks, trucks, jeeps, hundreds of heavy artillery guns, thousands of tons of ammunition, all just left on the fields of France.
So the men got home, but the army itself was effectively disarmed.
For a time, yes. It forced British factories to go into overdrive, working 204/7 just to replace the most basic equipment.
And it really set up this defining legacy, this idea that we still talk about today.
The Dunkirk spirit.
Right. What does that really mean?
I think it's that combination of courage, cooperation, and sheer determination from everyone, military and civilian, to overcome what seemed like an impossible situation.
And that spirit was so important for morale, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It became a rallying cry. It sent the message that if the country could survive that, it could survive anything Hitler threw at it.
And strategically, those soldiers who escaped, many of them were the same experienced troops who would return to France 4 years later for D-Day.
Exactly. Saving the army at Dunkirk made D-Day possible.
So when you look back, Dunkirk wasn't a victory in battle, but it was a victory of ingenuity and human spirit.
It really was. It showed that sometimes the perfect official plan isn't what saves you. It's the improvised, on-the-ground solution that makes all the difference.
A powerful lesson in how to handle a crisis.
Absolutely.
Okay.
When things go wrong, creativity and cooperation can achieve incredible things against all odds.
See you next time.